Hey everybody, it's Carson Gourdie, the Champagne sports anchor for Fox Illinois. And Illinois, they're feeling the vibes. From a program perception standpoint, last week's game against Michigan was huge. Illinois went out with the 100th anniversary of Memorial Stadium. They wore those classic throwback red-greens uniforms, and Illinois came to play. They were underdogs to the defending national champions, the Michigan Wolverines, and Illinois was the tougher team. They were more physical, and they're able to carry that for a 2-touchdown victory. There were serious questions about Illinois coming into that Michigan game. Could Illinois stop the run? Because they couldn't against Penn State, Kansas, and Purdue. Could Illinois run the ball? That's something that they haven't really seen since that Nebraska game. And that was supposed to be Michigan's strength. Even though Michigan was only 4-2, they still had a great defensive line with a bunch of NFL players. And they still had a very old offensive line with two really good running backs with Donovan Edwards and Carroll Mullins. Well, Illinois won both those battles. Michigan was averaging less than 3 yards a carry. Josh McCray had a really big game for Illinois as a running back, and they were able to pull away for a 21-7 victory. And it seems like death, taxes, and Illinois storming the field in 2024, and this is something that Illinois fans aren't taking for granted. This is a program that's had a lot of struggles since 1994, and for Brett Bielema to get another 6-1 start this year and beat ranked teams like Kansas, like Nebraska, like Michigan, there's finally hope in Urbana-Champaign that Illinois has it's not just a competent football program, it's one of the top half in the Big Ten. But last week was last week.
So, listen, Michigan was awesome. You know, we always did this little, hey, raise your right hand, pat your shoulder on the back, and move on, right? Like, hell of a job, but all we did is put ourselves in a position to make this game bigger.
Illinois got a huge challenge this week, traveling all the way to Eugene, Oregon. They're going to be taking on the Oregon Ducks. And Oregon is ranked as the #1 team in the country, and they got the resume to back it up. 2 weeks ago, they hosted Ohio State, and they beat them in a very high-stakes game, 32-31. And this offense with Dillon Gabriel is really clicking.
And so, I mean, is he the most talented quarterback we've probably seen? Probably so. You know, and it's not just because of his skill set. I think it's a combination of what he can do in the pocket, what he can do when he leaves the pocket, the player who he's handing the ball off to, and the guys who he's throwing the ball to. And so
people think about Dillon Gabriel when he transferred from Oklahoma. He was kind of like a point guard. He would spread it out to a bunch of wide receivers, a lot of quick passes, would make some really smart decisions. Dillon has found that deep passing game, and it's taken Oregon's offense to the next level. They got a really good wide receiver with Evan Stewart. He was a transfer from Texas A&M. He was missing in action for the early parts of the season, but Dan Lanning and that staff have done a really good job of giving Stewart the ball. He burned Ohio State on a really deep shot that ended up being the difference in them winning that game. And they got another really, really good wide receiver that transferred from Texas State a couple years ago. His name's Tez Johnson. He kind of reminds me of what Illinois has with Sha'Carri Franklin. He's the guy when it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 4, Gabriel needs a first down, he's going to target Tez Johnson. Tez has multiple games this year with 8, 9, 10, 11 catches throughout the game. Oregon, they can definitely run the ball. I mean, they have one of the better offensive lines in the entire country, but it definitely seems like the offense is predicated on the passing game. They're averaging over 300 yards, and they do short, intermediate, and deep shots. I mean, Dillon Gabriel seems like he's been the perfect quarterback to take over from Bo Nix. And now this offense isn't putting up 48 points. It isn't putting up 55 points like those old Chip Kelly Oregon teams, but they're very efficient. And when they need to get the job done, they do it. I mean, Ohio State came in as one of the best defenses in the entire country. That's what critics think about that Ohio State defense. And Oregon put up nearly 500 yards and 32 points. So even though Oregon only won 35-0 against Purdue, a lot of people think like, oh, why didn't they put up 60? I think Oregon's playing smart, and they're not showing too much of the playbook. When they need to score, they got the weapons. One of the big things for Illinois to try to stop this Oregon attack is getting pressure on Dillon Gabriel and those wide receivers. Against Michigan, that's something that Illinois did a great job of. Gabe Yakus was just named the National Defensive Player of the Week because of his performance. If anybody's ever seen the movie, one of my personal favorites, Waterboy, remember the crazy linebacker that Adam Sandler played, Bobby Boucher? That was Gabe Yakus. 13 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and forced a fumble. He was a game changer and a drive stopper. I mean, Michigan had drives in the second half where they got deep into Illinois territory, where they could have made that a closer game than what the scoreboard showed, and Gabe was just having none of that. It was one of his best games that he's played. keeps playing like that, he's going to be an NFL prospect. Edwards on the Illinois defensive line also had a really good game getting pressure. And it's not like Michigan is a bunch of high school offensive linemen. I mean, this was a program that's done a really good job of protecting Orgy and Tuttle, their quarterbacks, throughout the year. Illinois came to play. But it is going to be a difficult challenge against Oregon. Oregon has one of the best offensive lines in the country. And that's why it was so alarming in the first 2 weeks of the year against Idaho, the Potato Vandals, and against Boise State. They gave up a lot of sacks that was killing drives for Dillon Gabriel. So Dillon would have 380 passing yards. But you look at the scoreboard and they only have 24 points against Idaho. Just for context, when you play a team like Idaho, you're supposed to be scoring 60 and 70 points. And a big issue was that offensive line that didn't give up sacks last year when Bo Nix was quarterback. They took a big step back in the first 2 weeks. But since then, the offensive line has woken up. They kept Ohio State from generating any serious pressure from Dillon, and that's what helped that Ducks offense thrive. So it's going to be key for Aaron Henry to dial up some blitzes and try to recreate what Oregon did in the first 2 weeks, which was giving up sacks. And we got to talk about the stadium. Austin Stadium is not 108,000 like Beaver Stadium for Penn State. It's not 86,000 like Nebraska. It's not 90,000 like Wisconsin and Camp Randall. But what Oregon does have with its 54,000 fans is that it is structurally built to be super crazy. The way how the architecture is, the stadium kind of enclaves towards the side, so the noise gets trapped in it. It is one of the loudest stadiums in college football. Barry Lunny talked about it at the press conference on Monday.
Everybody from A to Z talks about how loud the environment is, maybe the loudest place in the country. If not, it's one of, for sure. And, I thought we handled it really well. Our first opportunity, the second opportunity, we didn't handle as well. And so it's going to be important for us to be able to handle it, and we'll practice that moving forward for the game.
As many fans, the noise is going to be there, and that's going to make it difficult for an offense with Luke Altmaier. Barry Lunny, he talked about it. He thought that they did a good job when they played Nebraska of handling that noise. Against Penn State, not so much. And we probably saw a couple cracks of that. Remember, end of the first half against Penn State, it's a 7-7 football game. Illinois is a couple yards away from going up 14-7 before halftime, but there was a really bad snap, which resulted in a long field goal attempt for Illinois that they missed. The game changed there. The game was over. They lost all momentum, and that helped get the crowd back in it. And again, in that game against Penn State, there was also a lot of false starts. That was a very sloppy performance. If they play like that against Oregon, it's going to make it really difficult to try to come out and pull off that upset. But 100%, Illinois is not going to be intimidated by the Oregon Ducks. We've seen this with Brett Bielema. The team shows up to play the big boy games. 2021, Penn State, 25-point underdogs. They beat them in overtime. Michigan last week, underdogs. They came in, they won. Brett Bielema has the best point differential of any Illinois coach since 1994, and it's by like 300 points. They're not losing games 35-0. They're losing by single digits. So I expect Illinois to show up pretty well for this game. Now, the spread's big. I mean, the spread is 21 points against Penn State this year. Illinois was a 19-point favorite. They did cover. They lost 21-7, and the game could have been closer if Illinois didn't make so many sloppy penalties in the second half. But in this game, Luke has to throw the ball better. Against Michigan, he got a lot of credit. That was a gritty performance. Luke did a great job of extending drives with his legs, picking up a couple first downs. He scored a touchdown on a quarterback sneak. Luke did a really good job of protecting the ball. Like, we saw what happened with Tuttle, Jack Tuttle of Michigan. He had fumbles. He threw an interception. He was taking bad sacks. Luke played a very high IQ game. He went 9 of 18 for 80 yards with 0 touchdowns, but also 0 interceptions. And when you play a team like Michigan, who has struggled offensively this year, that may have been the move. Because a bad pick six gets the Wolverines back in the game. A bad fumble allows Michigan to believe that, hey, maybe they may be able to come back and win that game. So in the second half, Illinois was running the ball a lot with the running backs, with Luke Altmaier. But when you're playing a team of Oregon's caliber, with a Heisman Trophy contender quarterback, with one of the best offensive lines, you're going to have to compete in a shootout. Now, throughout the whole year, we got to give Luke credit. He's played really well. One of his best games of the year, probably the best, was against Nebraska. That was a game where they were 9-point underdogs. He went 22-27, over 200 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. It was efficient. It was clean. And that's what won Illinois the ball game. Overall, you look at the whole track record with Luke Altmaier, 15 touchdowns, only one interception, getting around 200 yards a game. And Luke's best when he runs the ball. I mean, that's something that I asked Barry Lenny a couple weeks ago. Against Purdue, he had those designed runs and he was picking up a lot of chunk plays. Against Michigan, he started running the ball a lot. With a team that hasn't always had the most consistent offensive line, where there's been days where maybe Josh McCray just isn't generating enough production. When you have a dual threat quarterback, that cleans up a lot of errors. About Luke Altmaier, how he's improved from last year. He's definitely a much smarter player. Last year, he had 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, a bunch of fumbles. This year, he's got 2 turnovers total. And now when we're looking at Oregon's defense, everybody thinks about the Oregon Ducks, offense, 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 offense. That's what you thought with Chip Kelly. That's what you thought with Mark Helfrich, Marcus Mariota, DeAnthony Thomas. Dan Lanning is a different coach. He used to be the former defensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs when they won the national championship. So he has elevated Oregon's trench play. And trench play is the offensive line, the defensive line. Oregon is not a finesse team. They got big boys that want to get physical. And we've seen a huge change with the defensive output. Oregon's a team that used to give up 25, 28, 30 points per game. Dan Lanning has it in the ballpark of only giving up 16 points a game. And when you have an offense that's able to get as many explosive players in the transfer portal and high school recruiting, they're like on autopilot to win 10, 11 games a year. There's only one game this year where Oregon has given up more than 400 yards of total offense, and that was against Ohio State, who is number 2 in the country. So the defense is very strong. I think they've generated the 18th most sacks in all of college football. It's going to be vital for Luke to avoid that pressure and try to extend plays. Barry Lunny on Monday actually talked about what he expects to see from that Oregon Duck defense. If there's been one crack in the armor from Oregon so far, I would say last week they did beat Purdue 35-0. Illinois only beat Purdue 50-49. But the one stat that probably stuck out that Oregon would probably want to fix is the rushing defense. Purdue had a field day. They had 200 rushing yards and 5 yards a carry. No college football coach, I can assure you, wants to give up those stats. If Illinois was able to rush for 200 yards and get 5 yards a carry, that is keeping that Oregon offense off the field. That's extending drives, and also that's going to open up the passing game. And Illinois is a better team than Purdue. I don't care what happened 2 weeks ago. That's a rivalry game. Ryan Walters used to coach at Illinois. That was weird voodoo stuff. If Illinois was able to get 200 rushing yards, that means Luke Altmaier is going to have better opportunities to throw deep shots for Pat Bryant. That means the defense is going to be caught off guard, and he's going to be able to get those quick throws better to Sha'Carri Franklin. Illinois has the tools to take advantage of a really good rushing attack and have a balanced offensive day. Now, but we've seen with Illinois, there's been times they struggled to rush. Penn State, they only had 30 yards rushing. So this is going to be the game of I can't predict Illinois' offensive motor, the offensive line. They've obviously made a change. They've took Zy Chrysler out. He's not playing as much, and maybe the offensive line's playing a lot better. But if the offensive line shows up and they're able to get some chunk plays in the running game, it's going to be a much better day. And just in general, the vibes for Illinois football, they're good right now. Everybody always jokes that Illinois can only be a basketball school. There are Illinois football fans. This year has been great for attendance. 55,000, 60,000, a couple sellouts for Illinois football. And they're starting to show up when it matters most on television. That CBS game last week was watched by millions of people. Illinois wearing those old school helmets. They were just dominating the Wolverines. And this week, once again, they're going to be on CBS, taking on the number 1 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks, at 2:30 p.m. And this is the kind of game not a lot of people are expecting Illinois to win. People say Oregon is just that good. They have that much talent. Illinois might not have the horses. But this is a situation where Brett Bielema has proved the critics wrong. They've played 8 games this year. 5 of those times they've been underdogs. This is the 5th one. They've won 3 of those games outright. I don't know if Illinois is going to win. I don't know if they're going to lose. If they win, they're going to be a serious college football playoff contender. And the schedule is very favorable down the stretch. Michigan State, Rutgers, Minnesota, Northwestern. They'll be favored in each of those games. If they lose a close game against the Oregon Ducks. They still got a real shot at going 10-2, which would be the most wins Illinois got in a regular season since 2001. With the way the college football playoff is, I don't know if they would get in that 12 team because one of the bids has to go to like a Boise State or a Liberty or an Army or Navy. And then there's the 4 conference champions, and then there's 7 at-large spots. You got to compete with 2 ACC teams. You got to compete with Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Missouri, Ole Miss, Texas. It's going to be really difficult to imagine Illinois getting in the college football playoff if they lose to Oregon. They're probably more in line for a Citrus Bowl in Orlando or the ReliaQuest Bowl, formerly known as the Outback Bowl in Tampa. But before the season, would you ever really expect that Illinois would have a shot of making the college football playoff? I mean, who would really complain about a nice Florida Bowl? I don't think there's a lot of fans that would complain. On December 31st, they're playing a good SEC team in good weather in Florida. I'm telling you, last week against Michigan, they beat them. That was the most recruits Illinois has ever had at a game under Brett Bielema. And those recruits liked what they saw. They saw them storming the field. And then right after the game, Brett Bielema took advantage. He called those recruits. The recruits that he wasn't able to call because of NCAA regulations, they called him. This is the kind of team that they're building momentum. And when you start winning, the donors start buying in. And the donors might cough up a couple extra $100 or $1,000 or $1 million to sign that next great wide receiver in the offseason in the transfer portal, or that next great defensive lineman, or that next great quarterback. That's what we saw with basketball. Brad Underwood won enough games, and the donors like, hey, I'll give you money to try to get Terrence Shannon Jr. back. And, everybody saw how that turned out. Elite Eight. And Illinois gets the best recruiting classes every year because they have more donor money. If Illinois keeps playing the way they are, they're going to get more football donor money, which leads, and that's going to lead to keep getting better players and great seasons, season on season end. This is a game I'm super excited. Oregon was a team, when you grew up, you respected them. They always had those great uniforms. They were a team that people feared. You could close your eyes and all of a sudden it was 45-0. And this is going to be a great measuring stick for Illinois football. Illinois has a lot of 3 stars. They don't have 5 stars like Oregon, but they play a very physical brand of football, and Brett Bielema is respected around the country. The keys to the game for Illinois, Luke Allmeyer needs to improve that passing game, and Illinois needs to get some pressure on Dillon Gabriel. It should be a really exciting game. The last time Illinois has been on the road playing the number 1 team in the country was actually a pretty good day. It's 2007, and they took down the Ohio State Buckeyes, number 1 in the country, stunned them 28-21. And that led to a 9-3 year for Illinois and a berth in the Rose Bowl. So who knows? Maybe Illinois has more magic this week. Well, everybody, I'm Carson Gourdie, the Champaign sports anchor for Fox Illinois. I hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Thanks for watching. Stick around by subscribing today and don't miss a single video.